the ego is very uninterested in anything that takes away its sense of control and assurance.
Yes.
And real spiritual practice is a progressive ego death. And so
it is exactly. And that the ego fears death. And so, but you have to be pretty desperate to finally, I was pretty desperate. So I can't claim, oh yes, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was just desperate. But I find you have to be desperate enough to understand there has to be another way. I can't keep going on the road I'm on. That's a disaster. It's going to end badly. So another road is worth taking, even if it means a lot of difficulties.
One of the questions I had on our list is, when did homeopathy and allopathy part ways and why? I mean,
well, they never came together. What happened was that the ancient Greek Hippocratic medical system fell apart in the 18th century. And out of that falling apart and a disaster came a crisis. And out of that crisis in Germany, of which Dr. Hahnemann was part, came this new approach called Romantic science. And Goethe was behind it and everything else. However, what happened is that the material mindset of these scientists was by and large weighing down this whole attempt, Kitty Hawk flight, of trying a true romantic science going, or soul spiritual science, what Steiner calls spiritual science. But by about 1850, two developments took place: Pasteur and Rudolf Virchow. So Virchow, who was actually in many ways a vitalist, because you can't come up with the cellular theory unless you're a vitalist, but he came up with the idea that the center of life was the cell. And that gave the material mindset, oh, we can work with that. We can look at the cell, we can analyze the cell, and oh, that's where life is. It's in the cell. And then, so that took over of any attempt to look at life in a more holistic, soul spiritual way, just reduced to the cell. So we get cellular biology. Then the next thing that happened is Pasteur with his germ theory. Disease is because of this little animalcule or parasite or virus or bacteria, doesn't matter. We've reduced disease to a material cause.
Yeah.
And that took over. And then the third thing that took over was genetics, the gene. Now, genes make up 1 to 3% of all the factors in disease. They play a role, but 1 to 3%. And the rest is what?
Epigenetics.
Yeah, epigenetics, exactly. But they've only discovered that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, my brother's a geneticist, and I've had long conversations with him about this. But the point is, those three events basically sealed a material box around life. And it wasn't that the allopathy and homeopathy parted company. It's that basically the scientific community that was dealing with medicine just basically rushed into this material box, and then anything outside of that was occult.
Yeah.
Which is what it means, outside. And homeopathy fit into that category. So then the battle began between the homeopaths and these allopaths. Now, the term allopath comes from Dr. Hahnemann. They don't call themselves allopaths. Dr. Hahnemann called them allopaths because he said, if you follow the law of similars, you're a homeopath or a homopath, because it depends on how you're the same or identical, similar. But if you're not following any law or principle in medicine, you're an allopath. Allo means other. You have some other approach, which is usually just pragmatic. Well, let's try it on a bunch of people and see what happens. You know,
like the vaccines.
Well, the injection. It's not a vaccine, unfortunately.
Yeah, I understand, yeah.
But yeah, let's just try it. We'll do a clinical trial, and well,
whether they like it or not.
whether they like it or not. And if 60% of them seem to get well, okay, we'll sell it. But there's no principle, there's no natural law behind it, so that's why it's allopath. So you could say the allopaths parted company. It wasn't. Homeopathy was part of this new revolution, the scientific revolution, which is still trying to be born, you could say, which I think it will be after this disaster with allopathic medicine over the next 10 years. On the other side, I think we'll have this rebirth of this new scientific spiritual medicine. So they parted company with homeopathy, not the other way around. And then, of course, it was sealed in the 20s through the Flexner report, which is well known, etc., and the co-opting of all the medical schools, and even the so-called allopathic medical schools became drug-pushing centers.
Which, interestingly, Bill Gates Sr. was one of the key organizers of that whole movement.
Exactly. So they took over, because the old-fashioned doctors up until the 1950s, they used herbs and they used medicine, sometimes psychotherapy. They used exercise, sunshine, fresh air. They used all those things. But it got co-opted to a medicine this is the drug for treating this, and this is the dosage, and this is what you have to watch out for side effects. That's medicine. Unless you're a surgeon, then that's a whole different treatment. But just for internal medicine, it just amounts to, for this condition, you give this antibiotic or this drug, and if that one doesn't work, well, then you try these ones, because there are sometimes paradoxical effects in people, and well, we don't know why, and we don't know which upper is going to work for ADHD, so you try 5 or 6 until you hit one that seems to work.
Or lose the patient.
Or lose the patient. But the point is, allopathic medicine just all medicine got captured by this materialistic mindset as a result of the revolution through cellular biology, the germ theory, and then finally genetics. And so the birth of this new scientific revolution in medicine, healthcare, was literally suppressed. So I can publish something in Wikipedia as long as I'm talking about something that happened before 1850. If I try to talk about something after that, it will get suppressed, because that's the divide. Anything before then, they don't care about. Oh, that's just history. But if you start talking about anything after that, the editors come in and they start attacking you.
I'm wanting to ask you, when we look at this from a Steiner perspective or your own, which can be oriented towards Steiner or not, however you want to answer the question, we're talking about global forces acting on our consciousness that are playing themselves out in everything that you've been describing. Steiner talks about the different phases that we've been through, the different planets we've been on. What do you see going on from a meta perspective? If you it's easy to get caught in the jungle of it all, like, vaccine passports and lockdowns, and you can get caught down in the trenches and not really climb up and do what the alchemists call sublimation, rise above and get a big picture view. How do you see this playing out from a spiritual perspective? What do you think's really unfolding here?
Well, that's why I finally accepted Steiner. I read Steiner for many years and dismissed him and just could not get in his system. But then I read his PhD thesis, and I went on from there. But he's very scientific, very rational, although people show him as being this kind of spiritual, intuitive kind of thing. But no, he's very rational and very scientific.
He was a trained scientist.
He's a trained scientist, and he knew the science of his day as well as anybody. What he tells us is the following, exactly following from what you said, is we're all on a journey. What's called the Earth has been through many iterations, and the one we're in now is going through various iterations. But we're on a journey from God back to God, the prodigal son. we have to get to a 0 point, and that is the 0 point of incarnation into materiality. And that 0 point occurred, as Steiner said, in 1879. And prior to that, we were losing all of our old consciousness, all of our old intuition, wisdom. We all got locked into this mental box. Okay, that's why we're schizophrenic, because when you're locked in a mental box, you have no connection with the heart, no connection with the, you know, the feelings and the wisdom. You're cut off. Okay, yeah. That's the 0 point. Now, what Steiner says is our job now is to reverse thrust and go back up. But what does that mean? It means we have to increasingly leave the physical body. That's why Steiner said what, although he didn't use the term, but he knew it would happen roughly about now, what we call transhumanism. That is part of this evolutionary journey. It's bad if you look at it one way, but it's also meant to happen because we have to get out of our physical body. And well, that'll take thousands of years, but it's a process that is starting now, where increasingly we have to rise back up to the etheric level. So if you've done a lot of you know, consciousness raising, treatment or whatever, I've certainly experienced this, your physical body will become weakened, and you have to do a lot of work to keep it in shape, because just on its own it's not going to do that, so you have to really work at it. That's why we have something called regimen. People didn't used to do that. They had it. So we're losing our natural health in the physical body, so we have to really buttress that and work at it, which is okay. But we also have to accept that we're having to start to loosen ourselves from the physical so that we can get into the energy level. Because the more you get in the energy level, the more you have access to what we could call magical thinking and magical medicine or regimen. Because if I can tell you, think this remedy, that's magical, what many philosophers call magical thinking.
Yes, it's also...
It's not magical in the sense that there's no law or science behind it. It just means in most people's eyes, look, ma, no hands. It's nothing physical transpired.
And it's, you know, a lot of people, philosophers, attack the whole magical consciousness. They talk about it as childish and whatever, but... I hate to say, but that's what the placebo effect is proving to you, you know?
Exactly. But they, you know, again, they're locked. They have their blinkers. They have their belief system, and they're not going to change that. Just even quantum physicists recognize they couldn't change the views of the classical physicists. You know, they just had to gradually win the war over time. So we're heading up. But that means that we're facing a choice. And you can see that. The choice is, are you heading up or are you staying here?
Right.
And the more materialistic you are in terms of your pursuit in life or your values in life, or if you're captured by your possessions, material possessions, you're staying. You're locked in. This is what in the, you know, the Gnostic literature is called being buried alive.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you choose to go up, you're going to have a struggle because, you know, from the Matrix, the Medusa creatures, right? They come and attack that spaceship or that whatever, and they're trying to get into the... That's what you're going to get. As you start going up, you're going to get attacks from the Ahrimanic, the Prince of Darkness forces, the Medusa creatures. So you really, it's not an easy journey, but that's the choice. You want to go up, and that has to do with truth and love and living your true desire function, knowing who you are. Well, I can tell you, if you had told me all the pitfalls I'd taken to get here, I probably wouldn't have done it. At the time, my consciousness was such it would have scared me to death.
Well,
but
I think
I had no choice.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with the gravity that stops people from engaging legitimate spiritual practices.
Yes.
There's this unconscious awareness that it's a lot of work it's a lot of discomfort. And, the ego is very uninterested in anything that takes away its sense of control and assurance.
Yes.
And real spiritual practice is a progressive ego death. And so
it is exactly. And that the ego fears death. And so, but you have to be pretty desperate to finally, I was pretty desperate. So I can't claim, oh yes, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was just desperate. But I find you have to be desperate enough to understand there has to be another way. I can't keep going on the road I'm on. That's a disaster. It's going to end badly. So another road is worth taking, even if it means a lot of difficulties.